Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the OWASP Cambridge chapter evening event. I'd like to welcome our speaker, Tanya, for this evening. And yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. We can take questions in the middle. If you can put questions in chat, I will ask Tanya if it's relevant at the time. If not, we will have Q&A definitely at the end. I'd like to thank everyone for helping bring this event to fruition. And roughly we've got about an hour, so talking for about 45 minutes, and then enough 10 or 15 minutes for questions, either in between or say towards the end. I'd also, if anyone has any other ideas of speakers they would like or subjects they'd like us to cover, then please come back to us and we'll sort them out. But yeah, other ideas and other speakers, volunteers are always greatly appreciated. Without further ado, Tanya, if you'd like to start your slides, and I'll invite the rest in.
Sounds great. Okay. Can everyone see my slides? I'm going to assume the answer is yes.
Yes.
Awesome. And it's letting me pop out the chat on the side, so I'm going to keep it open and we'll see how I do on questions. Okay. Welcome everyone. Hi, I'm Tanya. And I want to talk about adding SAST, and I'll explain what SAST is in a minute, to your CI/CD without losing any friends. So I came up with the title of this talk because, how do I word this nicely? Okay, so basically, when I started doing DevSecOps, I was working in AppSec, and I started an OWASP project called the DevSlop, like sloppy DevOps DevSlop project, with my friend Nikki Becker. And we were just building CI/CDs and like just putting 1,000 tools in, like every tool I could get my hand on, I was like putting it in, and it took like forever to run, and it would throw false positives, and like no one would know where the reports were, and things were broken all the time, and people are like, Tanya, that's not that helpful. And so I learned about how to add tools in, but in a fast, efficient way, and how to get just better results. And static analysis I found was really hard at first. And so I'm going to go into like different strategies that you could do so that you can put it in your CI/CD and not tick everyone off. And I know that might sound a little weird as like a thing to do a talk about, but it's just I've seen it so many times, and so I wanted to help. And so I added SAST to the CI/CD. Batman, it's too slow. This is what happened when I added static analysis for the first time. And I was working, so I was doing my open source project, and it didn't matter that much, right? Like we're not on deadlines, we're working whenever we want to, we're just having fun. And we added more and more people to our project, and everyone was very relaxed and nice to me. But when you work in a professional environment, there's deadlines. And I remember going in to do AppSec at this company, and I just wrote an article about it actually that I'm going to release soon. And this guy proudly told me he had this big SAST tool in their CI/CD, and it ran with every single build, and it broke the build if there were any medium highs or criticals, and like no one was releasing insecure code, and it was perfect. And then I was like, cool, can I see it? And he's like, sure, because we're nerds, we're like really excited. And he shows me in the first one, oh, it's turned off. That's weird. The next one's turned off. The next one's turned off. The next one's turned off. The next one's on, but it's only alerting. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So we went through and they were all turned off or alerting. And there's 3 in alerting and like 100 or more turned off. It's like, oh. And then we go and we look and we're like, well, the people that are alerting, maybe they're looking at the alerts and then they're fixing the things, but you had to go, like you had to remote desktop to this other server and do all these jumps. And then you had to have a special password to get in and all this stuff. And we looked And only 9% of the devs in 3 years of them owning this tool, it was about 2 years of owning this tool at this point, had ever logged in. And none of them had logged in for 6 months. And he was so sad. And I was sad for him. I have a lot of empathy in my personality, if that makes sense. And I was like, oh no. And he'd worked so hard to set that up. And they turned it off. And it was because it threw false positives. And it was really, really, really slow. And like the vendor's like, oh, it only takes 10 to 15 minutes to run, but it would take at least 45, if not an hour and a half. Sometimes it would just spin on for like the full day. And he was just heartbroken. And so I want to talk about how we can avoid that fate. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk about static analysis and like what the heck is that? So just like a brief introduction. So if you've never done it before, we're going to do one slide about that. If you've done it before, it'll be really fast. What first generation is versus second generation static analysis, because the tools have changed greatly since COVID, and not because of COVID. Oh, wait a minute, a second. There we go. Strategies for putting a SAST into a CI/CD. Yes, there will be a recording later. Yes, there will be a recording. And then, oh, wait, back. I'm in Google Maps, Google Slides, and I haven't used Google Slides before, and I don't know how to go back. No, it's over. That's it. That's all I've got. Okay, I can't go back. Anyway. But strategies for how we can put it in a CI/CD, strategies for rolling it out, strategies for using it not in a CI/CD that might still give you a lot of value. Okay, so the problem I'm trying to solve with this talk is that there's lots and lots of insecure software, and most of the people in this meeting wouldn't have jobs if that was not true. You wouldn't be attending this meeting, and OWASP wouldn't need to still exist if that wasn't still very, very true. Malicious actors, bad guys, and bad guys of every gender are aware of this. And so that's the beginning. The second part is software developers are not going to keep waiting for us like they used to. When I started writing software in the 90s, we did waterfall. And quite frankly, I did waterfall until around 2014, maybe 2015 even. We did like baby waterfalls. They're like, it's agile. I'm like, a sprint is not 3 months. A sprint is not 6 months. Sprints aren't measured in months. But basically the developers aren't going to wait for us anymore. They're going fast and we have to go fast. And all of IT is just so fed up of waiting for us. And so we need to go faster. Okay, great. So what do we need in order to do DevSecOps? We need accuracy, we need speed, we need configurability, we need to be able to test from multiple angles. So I'm going to talk about static analysis today, but you need more than that. I work at a company and that's what we sell. You need more than what we sell. Oh my gosh, vendor's telling the truth. What? So you need some sort of interactive type of testing, like that could be a DAST, an IAST, a pen test. You need to check that your libraries are safe and secure, sometimes called supply chain security or software composition analysis. You still need quality tests. Like there's so many things that you need more than just SAST. So we're talking about one of the many ingredients to ensure your software is secure. And then the last point, usually I just show you one point per time and we talk about it, but I copied this slide and the animations did not copy. Anyway, the last thing we need is a good relationship. You don't have to be best friends and go have every single coffee break with them, but they have to like be aware you exist, have some sort of like willingness to work with you. Ideally, if you have a good relationship, they will wait a long time before they resort to turning off a tool. Like this guy where they turned off all the tools, they actually really liked him and had a lot of respect for him. And they felt he was very knowledgeable, but they just couldn't get their job done. And they it apparently was like quite a thing for them to turn it off behind his back. I mean, what they should have done is talked like adults, but I digress. But we need a good relationship or it just won't work. Okay, putting stickers on things, 5-year-olds, IT professionals. Oh, wait, this is not the meme I was supposed to show you. I was supposed to show you this one, the future of software development, software security, devs. They're both true. Unmuted. Okay, so I'm sorry, then you must not have heard my joke, and I don't know how I muted my thing, but sorry. But basically, the first meme was making fun of how I really like putting stickers on my laptop. The second meme is about the future of software development and security and software developers. So this shows them wrestling, but I like to think of it as them holding hands, working together. And they just happen to have big muscles while they hold hands, but really they're like, let's hold hands and see the future of IT together. That's my very soft, gentle impress. They're both true. Okay, yeah. So both memes are true. The first meme, the InfoSec professionals like to put stickers on things almost as much as 5-year-olds. But the second meme is also true. Okay, so what is SAST? So it stands for Static Application Security Testing. It also is called static analysis. So what does static mean? It means it stays still. So when we're doing something that's static with software, it means we're looking at the written code. And so static analysis analyzes the written code for vulnerabilities. When you do linting, or if you do software composition analysis, or you scan your code for secrets, all of those are static because you're looking at the written code. But SAST or static analysis specifically are an automated tool that helps you find bugs in your code. And we're going to talk about the two types because the industry is broken away. And so there's a bunch of companies now doing this next gen thing, which we'll talk about in a second. But what static analysis goal is to help you scale your security program. Because if you have one AppSec person like me, I can't read everyone's code. Also, I'm going to miss stuff. I'm a human. I make mistakes. Also, you're just getting one person's opinion then. And quite frankly, I don't like doing manual code review. I'm not a fan. I've done it. It's hard. You can do it. It's a hard, long day. It's a really hard, long day. People that do that, you have my respect. It's a hard job. Static analysis tools help us automate finding as many bugs as possible. And the idea is if you can do both manual and automated together, you'll get the absolute best results. But if you can't, let's say you have like hundreds of developers and you have 2 AppSec folks, we can't read every single person's code. We can't read all that code. We'll never get to sleep. We'll never get to eat. We'll never get to go get coffee. Our lives will be terrible. And so what we need to do instead when we scale our security programs is add automation. And that's what the purpose of SAST is. Finding lots of bugs. Oh, and also then you don't need to hire more AppSec folks, which are hard to get. It's hard to hire and keep a lot of AppSec folks. So why do we want to do it? So it can enforce important guardrails. I'm pressing the admit button. So that means you can make rules for your code and it can force those rules. It prevents bugs that have occurred before automatically. So if you found a bug, you can write a rule, not in all of the SAST, but most of the SAST, you can write a rule and then stop that bug from getting checked in again. You can eliminate a class of vulnerabilities. So you can try to get all of cross-site scripting or all types of injection. And you can do that with SAST because it looks for patterns. Well, some of them do. It helps you scale your AppSec program. And it automates code review, so you don't need an expert. And like, it is really hard to hire AppSec folks, to find someone that's qualified, that has experience, that's willing to come work for you, that you can afford to come work for you. It's hard. It's way harder than hiring a software developer. There are way fewer of us, and we're in higher demand. And so this is why we do static analysis. So what is first generation SAST? So first generation SAST, the way that it works is symbolic execution. And so it takes all your code and parses it into little bits like a compiler would. I had to write a compiler back in the day in college. It was hard. It was hard, point blank, full stop. It was hard. So parses it into little pieces. Then it goes down every possible execution path and it looks for potential bugs. Most of them report pretty much everything that might be a thing. So they find lots of stuff. Like they'll find hundreds or thousands of things in a big app. But the problem is if they take hours or days to run. So the first time I ran a SAST, I was still a dev. So I was leading a dev team. And we hired this really, really brilliant guy named Nadeem. And he gets the computer set up and he gets our code ready. And he's like, okay, boom. And he checks and it's running. And he's like, okay, great. And he goes to put his jacket on. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm going to go home. And I'm like, what? No, we finally got it. We finally got the license. You're finally here. And he's like, oh yeah, this won't be done before tomorrow or the next day. I'm like, what? Because I was used to dev tools. I'm like, maybe he's just going to like the cafe across the street because he doesn't like the cafe in the building. And he wants the fancy coffee instead of the regular coffee. That's why he's got a jacket on. And it's just going to be 5 minutes. It took 18 and a half hours to run. I was not used to that with my dev tools. That was a lot. It took up the entire server. Nothing else could run that whole time. Like it was done. It took up every single resource. It was to the absolute max. And that was it. And I was like, but Nadeem, we got he gets the results. I'm like, great, let's look at them. He's like, no, you can't look at them. I have to go through them first because it was 90% false positives. He had hundreds of results from our app, from one app. And it took him 3 weeks to look at all of them. And then he boiled them down to 20 things that were actually legit concerns. And I was like, well, what was the rest of it? He's like, noise. That's what SAST do. They're just a bunch of noise. I was like, but how's this acceptable? As a dev, I was so confused. We also couldn't customize it for our environment. We couldn't put in our CI. There's no way we could run something 18 hours. That was difficult. We ended up paying $10,000 for the SAST and $30,000 for his time for a $40,000 contract to find 20 bugs. Yeah, and then it was close to the end and I could only convince them to fix 6. And that took weeks of effort, but I digress. All of the SAST tools that are first gen are closed source. You can't see the code for the SAST tool. For some people this matters, some people it doesn't matter. Open source does not necessarily mean free. Free does not necessarily mean open source, but a lot of them are not free. Okay, I guess I'm going to click the admit button so that I can go to the next part of the slide. It finds lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff, good and bad. Just so many false positives. And even after like tuning and tuning and tuning and tuning, still piles and piles of false positives. And that's why those developers had turned off the SAST where I went to go work, because they're like, it would just break. It was just false positives all the time, like at least half. Like we would waste so much time. Like when you know what's going on, when you have a real bug for us, tell us and we'll fix it. I don't have time for your broken tools that do not work. I have work to do. So next generation SAST. What do I mean by that? Star Trek, the next generation. Oh, wait, no, not that type of next generation, Tanya. Brown. Okay, back to the matter at hand. Next generation SAST. What do I mean by that? So they do flow analysis. So flow analysis happens on first and next gen SASTs. And the way it works is it finds your sources and your sinks. So a source is anywhere you get something from another system. So that could be, I called an API, it gave me something. There's a search field and the user put a search criteria in, they press the search button, that's input to my app. Anything you get into your app is a source. So I've sourced it from there. Then somewhere later in your app, you use it. That's where you sync it. So you've used it for a calculation, or you've saved it to the database, or you've showed it onto the screen. That's you syncing it. That's the sync. In between there, it must validate that it's safe to use. If it does not validate, 2 thumbs down, you got cross-site scripting probably. There's almost always some sort of bad problem. You've got injection, you've got problems if you don't validate in between the source and the sync. That's fast. And it's pretty accurate as long as your tool can go from file to file to file. So some tools can't. An example of a tool that can't is the free version of Semgrep. It can't do that. It can't go from one file and track your source onto another file where it syncs. You have to have the paid version. And you might be surprised to learn a lot of paid SAST, they can't do that. So you miss a bunch of bugs. Okay, so next. So this is the main thing that next-gen SAST do, anti-pattern matching. So this is where, let's say, this is what cross-site scripting looks like. I mentioned cross-site scripting because it's pervasive. It's in a lot of apps. It's extremely problematic, and it's bad. We do not want it. We don't want that in our app. Okay, so it looks for this pattern across all of your code, because every time we see that pattern, it's bad. Like every single time we know it's bad. One that a lot of people use is eval. So there's a function called eval, and people are like, you shouldn't use it anymore. It's really unsafe, but they haven't turned it off because of backwards compatibility. So it just looks for eval in every single place. And if it finds it, it's like, you have eval, you know, you're not supposed to use that. Please don't use that. You need to fix it. Anti-pattern matching is lightning fast compared to symbolic execution. It's so fast, and it's extraordinarily accurate. So what I mean by that is, if it's looking for the pattern, it will find the pattern. Now, so it has a high percentage of true positives. So all the results that it is reporting is mostly true. They're real legit bugs, but it misses some stuff. So if you don't have an anti-pattern ready for a certain type of bug, you miss that bug. That sucks. So all of the tools can miss things. Next gen misses slightly more, and by that I mean 5 to 10% more than first gen. So there are trade-offs here, as with everything. Okay, more. They're really fast. So my colleagues tell me, because I work at a SAST company, so spoiler alert, I've got bias, although I chose to work there. I had more than one job offer. But basically, they tell me it runs in seconds. Usually it takes over a minute when I run it. But compared to where I was like, Nadeem, why are you putting your jacket on? Where are you going? Why are you going home for the day? Don't leave the building. It's going to be done soon. And he's like, I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. It's very fast. For me, that was a huge improvement. It's mostly true positive. So the results are like what you're finding are real bugs. There's very few false bugs. But there's some false negatives, which means you miss some things. They're usually, so next-gen SAST, they're all created, from what I understand, since the pandemic. And so as a result, DevOps existed, Agile existed. People aren't making tools that work only for waterfall anymore. So they specifically, intentionally work with your IDE. They work with your CI/CD. They work with Jira and Bugzilla. They work with all your tools that you want to play with. They work with them because they are made more for devs than for us AppSec folks. Yeah. So they're specifically made more for devs than for the, like, not like, oh, AppSec folks aren't allowed to use them, but it's specifically so that it does work with their processes, because we figured out from the way the old tools work that they weren't popular. It was really hard to get buy-in. Devs turned them off, so they had to change. So let's talk about strategy. I really like this cat meme. I have it in like many of my presentations. It's like one of my favorites. Anyway, Okay, so some SaaS strategies that work. So I'm going to go over the high level of them, and then I'm going to dive into each one. Okay, so how to select a tool, and then company specific checks. So after the first 6 months of using a SaaS tool and you've like fixed all of the bugs it finds, what do you do next? Because you can still get more value. And then how to roll it out. And we're going to talk about rolling out, surprise, in a CI/CD, but we're also going to talk about rolling out manually at the like just a little bit, and like plugging into your IDE or using it with your code repository, etc. instead. Okay, so choosing a SaaS tool. So I think the first decision is first or second gen. So if you are doing counterterrorism activities, if you are doing, if the democracy of your nation depends upon the system that you are making, if you are Amazon, where if your system goes down, like that casino MGM, if your system goes down, you lose millions of dollars a minute, you might want to choose first gen, because it will find literally everything and you can spend millions of dollars. So when I worked at elections, so I was the CISO for Canada for the 2015 general election. So across all of Canada, I ran all that security with my team. My team was amazing. I'd love to pretend it was just me. The team they were amazing. And we did a full first gen with an expert, reviewed the whole thing. We did another code review with a first gen with a different tool with a different expert to find bugs that first one missed. We did 2 full pen tests. Then we built an entire returning office and ran an entire fake election. We threw security incidents in and emergencies. And then we threw hackers at that too. Then we fixed those things. Then election day came and it was chill. Nothing went wrong. Everything was awesome because we dealt with it for 4 years. I was only on the case for 2 years leading up to almost 2 years, and my contract ended after. But for almost 2 years, we just battered the system over and over and over again because it was of the utmost importance to our entire nation. Most of the rest of us don't have that level of pressure, and we can't spend $1 million on one app of testing. We can't do that. It's not affordable. We can't spend literally a year and a half battering it over and over again. We can't do that. And so if you're not like that, I feel you need second gen SAST. That's how I decide. Okay, so now if you decide first or second gen, great. So from there, does it support the programming languages my companies use and the frameworks? So it's nice it supports Java. Does it support struts? Also, don't use struts. Terrible. Use Spring. Anyway, does it support the things you're using? You don't want to buy 4 different SaaS tools, ideally, right? So hopefully it supports all the things you need it to. You also want to check if it's good at it. So I've heard of, oh, that's nice, they claim they support Rust, but it's really just the free Rust tool that I can get anywhere, or it's just Brakeman for Ruby. I could just get that for free. Does it actually add value on top of that? So digging in a little deeper, this is where I would do a proof of concept. So I would want a copy for let's say a month. And I scan a bunch of apps. Does it get more results than my old one? Are the results true? Is this good? Just dive deep with it for a month before you pay I don't know how many thousands of dollars for this tool. You'd be surprised how much a really big shop pays for tools like this. Do you have a custom in-house framework that isn't open source? If you do, that's bad news bears. No SaaS tool is going to support that. You would have to write your own rules within the stack analysis tool, and you can do that, right? A bunch of them allow you to write your own rules. However, that sounds terrible. I personally wouldn't do that. Okay, does it work with all my dev tools? Does it work with my CI/CD? Does it work with my IDE? So Eclipse, IntelliJ, VS Code. Does it work with my bug tracker? If you have an ASOC tool, an application security orchestration and correlation tool, does it work with that? Ones that suck up all the results and show you metrics, in pretty dashboards. If it's not working with your tool set, that's an X against it. Am I going to have to manage a server that runs this tool? I used to spend a zillion years. I used to spend many hours per week just trying to make my one SAST server not barf. We had 3 of them, and they were always falling down. They were always crashing. They always weren't working. We'd paid for 3 engines and 3 servers, and it was such a disaster. I could never get more than 1 running at the same time. And the vendor would tell me, oh, no, it does do this. Well, I'm your customer, and I've paid money for it, and it doesn't do that. Can I have 2/3 of my money back because it doesn't do 2/3 of what you say? No, I'm going to pass. We're not going to renew. Will I have to share access to my source code with the vendor? So a lot of us are not cool with that. I've been in situations where the companies are cool. I've been in situations where the companies are like, no, our intellectual property is extraordinarily valuable. I'm not sending it, especially across a border, because different countries have different laws. And I'm a Canadian, and we are very sensitive to sending things to our neighbor America because they have the Patriot Act, which means their government can say, just give that to us, and they don't have to tell us they took our thing. And so we are not allowed to send certain things over the border because we know the government can just snag it whenever they want to. Pricing. Can we afford it? That's just what matters. Can we afford it? Is it easy to work with my tools? And lastly, do I need custom rules? And when I suggest this, I'm like, is your AppSec team completely afraid of code? Have they never written code in their life? Are they completely non-technical and all they want to do is just see a dashboard and report things? Or are they going to get their hands dirty? And most AppSec teams get their hands dirty. Most of them have seen code and or written code before, but sometimes you have those teams where they were late to a meeting and now they're in charge of AppSec and they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And writing custom rules is too much for people at first, at least for those people. So you don't need to buy a tool that allows for that because some tools have it and some don't. Okay, so this is a meme making fun of security tools because so many of them, they're just not as robust as dev tools. Like developers would not put up with the crap that we put up with from our tooling, but I digress. Okay, so next. Company-specific checks are often most valuable. So I'm checking and it looks like I have 12 minutes left, so I better move it. Okay, so common trends that we, and by that I mean my team at work, see across a lot of companies. So at first, you get a SAST and you run it and you scan all of your apps and you decide all the things that you feel are worth fixing and you fix those things, and that's awesome. And then after that 6 months, what do? They'll still send you some new rules occasionally and you'll still block bad things from being checked in, but what else can you do? There's potentially a few findings after you fix those things. So this is where you can do specific checks. This is where you write custom rules. And I realize like there are some AppSec folks that aren't at a level where they can write a regular expression, and that's okay. And they don't know how to write like no code, low code, and that is okay. But most of us can. Like I'd say 80% of us can. It's like depending upon the tool, how easy it is to do. But basically, when you make company-specific checks, they're high signal. So let's say you have a rule. So when I used to do .NET, we had an app and it was my fault. I'd opened a database connection and I'd forgotten to close it. And then I crashed prod. I was not popular that day. And so from then on, we used something called using. And you have to close using or it won't compile. And so from then on, it would have been nice if we could have forced people to use it, right? But we didn't have a SAST at the time. This was many years ago. But this is where you could say, oh, did you do database open or database close? That means you didn't use the using phrase and what you're supposed to do. And so we would block it, be like, sorry, no, we do this now. And what it does is it protects against memory leaks, and memory leaks are terrible. High impact. So you can tailor it to like specific business needs. So when I was at elections, we worried about something called voter suppression. All groups that run elections worry about this. So we had different bugs that were really important to us that might not be important to other people because we have a unique business risk. So this can be like detecting personally identifiable information if you're an HR company or healthcare or whatever the thing is that's specific for your org. You can also write business logic rules if you really get into it. The built-in tools will never really find that. Like DAST and SAST don't find those. Like they just don't. They'll tell you, yes. So the other thing you can do is, so the last quote is like, it's from my colleague Clint, but basically if you, how do I word this? If you have a bug bounty program or you have a pen test done and you get a report of a bug where you're like, wow, that's really terrifying. Whatever developer made that mistake, they wrote tons of other code for you. That mistake could be in a lot of places. And so what you can do is write a rule for that and search across your entire code base and find all of them within a few minutes. And so I have had a lot of value with this. Like when I used to get pen tests, I could only afford 2 a year when I was in the government, except elections that had more money and more pressure. And so if you can only get 2 a year, I would take the results from one and I would manually look for them. Well, imagine if I could automate looking for them across the code base and fix all of them. Then 6 months later, have the next pen test. Like I would have looked even smarter. Yes. Okay. The printer that simply worked and other fairy tales. It's true. My printer is very annoying. Priority 1 and 0. Yeah, so priority 1 is really important. Priority 0 is literally leave the meeting and go fix it now. Yeah, I also didn't know what that meant when I first saw that quote. I'm like, P1, P2, like parking. Okay, rolling out stack analysis, automated, but no CI. So this is an option for you if you don't have permission, go home and look for a job. P0, go home and look for a job. Oh, I love it. Okay, so before the CI, before you get to your CI/CD or your DevOps pipeline, before you get to Jenkins, Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, whatever you're using, Bamboo, Circle CI, all of those, Cucumber. Okay, before that, even further left, you can scan in your IDE. So the thing you code in all day. So for me, it's VS Code. That's because I worked in Microsoft shops over and over again. Then I worked in Microsoft. So I'm probably going to die using VS Code, and that's fine. I know that there are other ones. That's okay. But basically, what they do is your SAST tool plugs into it, and then you get little red squigglies underneath things you've done wrong. So like when you tab off, you get the red squigglies of death, like you would in Microsoft Word. It's like, this spelling's not good, Tanya. It's the same thing for your code. So you can do that. That's very far left, earlier in the system development lifecycle. Then every time you check your code in, you could do other scans as well. So you could have, let's say, some super important checks, or you could run. So I personally like to do the full gambit, like scan for everything. Because when I check in my code, then I go get coffee, or I have lunch, or I go home for the day, or I go to a meeting, or whatever I'm doing, I'm not. So when I run my CI/CD, I'm like this. I'm like, when's it going to finish? But when I check in my code, I'm like, whatever. I just keep coding or doing whatever I'm doing. And then you can get a report 10 minutes later. It doesn't matter if it takes a long time. It's okay. Oh, so these are like further left. So I usually actually prefer to do it this way. And then in the CI/CD, I just do emergency checks because the developer should have already been able to fix the bugs here. So then if I'm in the CI/CD, I like to roll out really high signal checks to start. So things that are scary. So just the scary rules, the scary bugs that I don't want. And I start with those, and those run very fast because I just have like 12 or 20 or 30 instead of hundreds or thousands, right? Super fast. And I partner with friendly dev teams. I test it with them. And first it's just alerting. So first it's alerting and I see it, then it's alerting and it's showing them. Then it makes a pull request comment and it's like, hey, I don't like that. And then eventually we block on those rules. So you can move up in intensity. Then, like I said, like turning your bug bounty or your pen test results into custom rules, add those on top of it. So you're preventing those bugs from ever happening again. You can also find variants of the same bug. So just like a rainbow credential stuffing attack, or a rainbow table, or a rainbow stretch if you're like an athlete. It's called when you stretch, you can do a rainbow stretch. It's where you find like variations of the same thing, because there's a lot of bugs you might have missed with your original rule. So you can open it up, make it wider, and you add that to the CI. And basically you can raise the posture a little bit at a time. You don't have to go full blast. And so if you do this, you're more like where you start with just a few rules and you're just alerting, and then eventually you're making some comments, and then eventually you're blocking, right? And if you also gave them access to the tool to use in the IDE themselves, they already saw those bugs. They already know they should have fixed them, right? So you've given them every opportunity before you blocked. Doing that really like can make it gradual and less painful and get like way better results. Okay, so manual. So you can do a full scan of every single repo. So I like to do that when I start and just look at the danger zone of like, these are all criticals and like, what do I need to do here? And I'll do that myself. I don't want all the devs to have to see that crap. I'm going to dig through it and see how it looks. I'm going to choose the most important ones to start. You better believe it. So then I want to do developer education, and I realize I founded a training company. So I sound really biased, but I sold my training company. So there. So I'm not even like selling training now. And I still think it's really, really important. Coding guidelines so that you can tell the devs about the things you don't want them to do. Secure guardrails. So those are like making a rule to stop a bug that you know you don't want, or it's not even a bug. Sometimes it's just like quality of code. Then you can work on solving classes of bugs. So like all of injection or whatever type you want to look at. Okay. And so this is like, if you want to do it manually, you could do this too. So you could have really high important things in the CI and then still do manual things outside because you don't want to slow it down, or you don't feel you have like enough oomph with the teams to be allowed to do that. Okay, so a brief illustration. So SAST scanning and the CI/CD. So whether you're doing DevOps or Agile or Waterfall, you still need requirements. You still need to design something. You still need to code something. And so the first time you can use a stack analysis tool, you have to have some code. You can't use it before. None of the automated tools for scanning, like SAST, AST, IAST, RASP, secret scanning, SCA, none of those will work until the coding phase. But you can put it in your IDE. So SAST for each feature or every check-in, or as you're coding. Then testing, so you can test every single thing in the testing phase. Like you can do a full scan of everything if you want, if you're going slow enough. And then daily or weekly full scans. So like as new CVEs, common vulnerability enumerators, or CWEs, which are less often come out, SAST people add new tools, all of them do. And so then you find new rules. You also might find things changed you didn't know changed. And so in the coding phase, if you find a bug, it costs on average $80 to fix. When you find it in the testing phase, it costs 3x amount to fix. So I put $2 signs, but anyway, it costs more to fix. In the release and deployment phase, it costs even more. So it's like 10x, I think. It goes way up. It costs way, way more. So we want to fix bugs earlier. If you let it out into prod and a malicious actor finds your bug for the first time instead of you, it costs exponentially more. It costs so much more. And so ideally, we want to find the bugs first. We want to fix them as early as we can in the SDLC because life is better. Yeah, so that is this silly slide. Okay, so conclusion, because we're running out of time. Yes, I'm almost exactly on time for question period. So what did we learn? We talked about what SAST is and why we might want to use it. We talked about different ways to deploy SAST, especially in the CI/CD or like automated ways that are very efficient. We still need to do more than just stack analysis, and that is okay. We have I have helped you learn one thing today, not all the things. And we also need more than just tools, right? Like we still need security requirements and threat modeling and all these other things, and that's also okay. So we learned one thing today, and I hope I gave you some ideas that can help you at work. And with that, I'd like to give you some resources. So I run the community for Semgrep. And so that means I create the newsletter and I run the Slack channel with help. And I do stuff like this. And I also train our customers. And so if you want to, like, we run stuff like this every month. Actually, we run a few things a month. So if you want to join us, here are some links that might be helpful. And I am a resource. I have a YouTube channel and a Twitter and a blog and all the things. I even have silly TikTok. And so if you follow SheHacksPurple, that is mostly me. I do have an imposter that is trying to sell casino stuff. So if the picture has lots and lots of cleavage, it's not me, that's an imposter. But for the rest of the stuff, I'm SheHacksPurple. And so please feel free to check out all those things. And with that, if you want to get the slides right away, you can go to that link and they're up there right away. Okay, so questions. Thank you. Yes. So Ashley asks, any recommendations for SAST tool for PHP code? So I work at a SAST company, and I had my chance to work at basically almost any company I wanted. I have a lot of choices because of basically speaking at conferences and writing a book. And I chose Semgrep because I like their tool the best. And so I used to use it all the time with clients. And so then when they approached me about buying my company, I actually had a bunch of companies approach me, but I was like, yeah, their tool's actually really awesome. And it turns out they're nice. And I really wanted to work somewhere where they're really nice to me. So that doesn't probably play into your purchasing thing, but that's what I would use. But it also depends on if you want to do first gen or second gen. So they're a second gen. You might need first gen. For instance, if you, I don't know how to say it, but if you need to be absolutely perfect. And like the level of security assurance you need is extraordinarily high. You would want to make sure that like you might want to do first gen. It depends on like your processes. Like first gen's generally better for waterfall, like is the way it works. But it's, yeah, so I hope that helps. Are there more questions? And also, Ashley, did that answer your question? I can paste this into the chat so that you can just get the slides if you want to, because people tend to always want the slides. And I don't know, maybe I'll just do like, if you want my blog, I don't know if you actually want it, but there you go. Are there other questions? I don't know. Perfect. There we go. Ken's, oh, yes. Based on recent requests I received from one of our developers, what are your thoughts on allowing devs the permissions in SAST tools to ignore or turn off certain findings? Oh, Leroy, that is such a good question. Okay, so I would have to say, I feel it really depends on your trust level with them. So if you have a security champions program and those developers have had training on the SAST tool and they know how to validate that it's a false positive, and you've built up trust with them and you expect them to not go behind your back and just mark everything as a false positive, then I would. If they have not had training, I wouldn't. If you haven't built up any trust with them and don't know them, I wouldn't. Because what I find happens, so this was another department I worked at. So one day, like I'd been whining and whining and whining, like fix my bugs, fix my bugs, fix my bugs. And all of a sudden this one dev fixed like something like 37 bugs that morning. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's a lie. That he can't have fixed 37 bugs this morning. Even if he had like been working on it for 2 or 3 days and then just checked all those fixes in at the exact same time, I still don't think he could have done 37. Like he was a great dev, don't get me wrong. And I went to talk to him and I'm like, did you actually fix those or did you just mark them as fixed? And he's like, they wouldn't let me go to prod until I had fixed these things. We're not fixing them, Tanya. I don't have time for your crap. Like I have a job to do. And so then we had to have a big discussion. And so we ended up compromising and I took half the bugs off the list. And then I did get some bug fixes and it ended up just being like 6 or 8 fixes in the end, which I was really not satisfied with. I was really ticked about it. But I'd rather get 6 or 8 bugs than 0. but I really wanted all 37, and our security consultant had recommended those, and we'd had hundreds of bugs in the tool. And so if you give them that access, one, it's really hard to take back, and two, it could work out where they're turning things off they shouldn't, and they know they shouldn't because they have a lot of pressure on them to get things done. Like that dev, his wife told me that she would wake up in the middle of the night and he'd be asleep on the sofa with his laptop on his chest regularly because he was working all day and all night, every single night, and he just couldn't handle more pressure. And like, that's a management problem, right? But yeah, so I just wanted to say that. Can SAST tools handle prioritization based on CVSS score? And what about EPSS score? I don't know what CVSS score is or EPSS score. Juan, do you want to come off mute and tell us what those are? Because I don't know where the extra S is. I'm used to common vulnerability, like enumerator. What is CVSS and EPSS? Okay, well, we'll see if Juan clarifies. Oh, maybe it's, oh, okay, perfect. He's clarified. Okay, so it's showing me exploit prediction scoring system. Oh, cool. Common vulnerability scoring system. Yeah, but the EP, okay, exploit prediction scoring system, the new approach. I have not read about that yet. I'm going to read about it. That's really cool. I'm looking at it, and like, it's estimating the likelihood that it will be exploited in the wild. Is it based upon actual like chatter on the dark web? Because I know that Google released a threat feed where they tell you which CVEs are currently being discussed on the dark web for exploit. And like, if I know they're talking about one specifically and I know I have it, I'd probably want to go fix it. Or is it just like they're just guessing on the likelihood? CVSS looks at attack vectors and has a ranking based on context, as CVE lacks context. Yeah, definitely, like, you want that. I don't know of any SAST tools that do that yet. A bunch of the ASOC tools do that. So I'm just going to put this in the chat. So ASOC stands for Application Security Orchestration and Correlation. So some examples would be Tromso, Security Phoenix, Cloud Defense, but it's more of an ASPM. Oh, I have like this giant list, Defect Dojo from OWASP. Like there's piles of them. They suck up all the tools, and then they can give you more context to make that decision. But most of the automated tools, they can't give that. I believe that we're working on adding more context in our tool, but I don't know the details yet of how deep that's going to go. You can have a vulnerability like a CVSS, but it's not going to be exploitable at all. Yeah, Juan, it's true. It's totally true. There's lots of bugs that get reported that like are never going to be exploited because you have these 4 other things that are protecting you from that. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Okay, so there's another question. Thoughts on commercial SaaS scanners in the matter in terms of your preference? So my first choice is where I work. So like, I just prefer the second gen SaaS, period. Like, it's rare that I've worked in a place where I've been allowed as much time as I was allowed at elections to do a really, really, really good job. And so being able to like have that time where you're just dedicated, like as a consultant, only to one specific app for like a year and 8 months is really rare. And so if I'm allowed to do that, then honestly, I'd like to still use a second gen SaaS, fix all of that, and then do a first gen SaaS, like to have 2 opinions, because a second gen SaaS is just so much faster and so much accurate. Basically, as an AppSec person, I didn't do almost any stack analysis until second gen SaaS started coming out, because I just hated it. And I was just like, I'll hire a consultant because I don't want to do it. And I wrote code forever. I can read code, and I just hated it. I was like, they're so wrong, they're so broken, they're so crappy. I would say of all the first gens, the best one in my opinion is Veracode. I hope no one calls me and yells at me about that, but I really like their Greenlight product. But there's second gen SAST that have like the similar to Greenlight, where you install it into your IDE and it does the little red squigglies underneath and tells you when things are wrong. I've seen really good results with pushing security that far left. If the dev taps off the line and then it says, hey, like, we don't think you should do this, we think you should do that instead, this feedback's like instantaneous. It's really helpful. So I prefer second gen. And other examples of second gen, so Semgrep, there's Quiet AI, there's Sneak Code. There was Reshift, but they actually just closed their doors. And they're Canadian, so that makes me kind of sad. Okay, is Semgrep free viable option to start adding SAST into the developer's lives slowly, or does it lack too much? Sebastian, I would say like 90% of our users use the free version. We would like them all, obviously, to use the paid version. But the free version will find tons of bugs for you. So all the rules there are community rules. They're not quite as high quality. So there'll be some false positives because although we built lots of them, the community built lots of them. So like they're not perfect, but they're good. And like thousands and thousands of companies use the free version of Semgrep and don't switch to the paid version because they get enough value with that. And they're like, it works and you can still write all your custom rules with it. And you can run the engine for free, which I'm like, how do we make money again? But I digress. So the free version's totally viable. And quite often, like we start with that and then maybe 6 months later, they graduate up to the pro version, or maybe just for like certain teams. And I think you can use the first 10 pro seats for free. Like yeah. Okay. So I'm looking at more questions. Tanya, there is an OWASP page listing all the free open source and commercial SaaS tools. Yes, Sam. Nice to see you, Sam. Awesome. Everyone should go see that page. I have used that page actually quite a few times for research, to show students, to show clients, to like try to convince them like, yes, there are lots of SaaS tools. Do you want to evaluate all of them? Okay, Keaton, with second generation SaaS offerings, how much time would you typically allocate for manual code review? I don't like manual code review. I don't like it at all. I like most companies that I see, they do none. Or if they do it, it's a senior dev doing it, and they're doing it on pull requests sometimes when they have time, and they're mostly just reviewing juniors. And so what I've done in the past is given secure coding training to everyone, but especially like working with the super senior devs that do those pull request reviews and trying to get them as much support as humanly possible. Like, you know, if they do .NET, getting them a secure coding in .NET book, which I have one behind me, like getting them as much as possible in regard to like supporting them in that code review. But I like never do it. I'm just being honest. Or if I'm doing it, I'm doing it like just reviewing the SaaS results and making sure they're real legit results and like taking out all the false positives. But actually sitting there and reviewing every single security control, I haven't done that in years, because they're just like, they have 200 apps. And if I start doing that, it'll take me a week to do one. And then what happens to the other 199 apps? They've gotten zero attention. And quite frankly, there's often a security incident, and there's this and there's that dragging me away, and there's a meeting, and then it just never happens. So do I wish that we did more manual code review and we had time for that? Yeah, like it sounds good. And if you have someone that's really good at it, so I would say I'm weak in that compared to like the other areas of AppSec. But if you have someone that's really strong at it, like there's these two guys that run the one of the AppSec podcasts, Ken and, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I forget the other guy's name, Seth, Ken and Seth, and like they teach this course and they're like outstanding. Like if I could hire them, yeah. Awesome. Do we have any more questions? Because we're right at time and I'm probably supposed to let you leave. Adrian, do we have any more questions? I don't see any.
I don't think there's any more questions, Tanya. I'd like to thank you very much and thank everyone for attending this month's webinar event. And I guess the usual would be a round of applause for Tanya, and thank you very much. And thank you for some really good questions and a really useful insight into SAST tools and their contribution to the AppSec community. Thank you very much. And again, anyone that has any topics they'd like covered in future events, please do let me know. Everyone have a good evening, and thanks again to Tanya, and thanks everyone. Have a good evening. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Nice to see you, Sam.